Good morning, everyone. His wife, and this morning he will be giving a Dharma talk on mountains and rivers. We invite you to ask questions, which is basically what mountains and rivers is. And I'm here because Sokuzan is experiencing intense arthritic pain in his hip, and it's making him very difficult to function, but nevertheless, he insists. And so also I would encourage your questions. We also have been experiencing intermittent internet. So we're challenged by a couple of things this morning, and we'll do the best we can to address your questions and to get Sokuzan's wisdom. He will be off stream or off site, so we'll just feature the Buddha in our video image. Thank you all, and hope you are well.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Good happy Mother's Day to all of you that means everybody, because everybody's giving birth to something. So I'm having some difficulty this morning. I prefer not to be on screen. This is pretty choiceless for me, so I don't make these decisions. There aren't any. There are no decisions. So since this is mountains and rivers, the idea here is to ask the teaching person questions. If you don't understand it, it makes no difference if you understand it or not. That's the mundane path. This path is with the open space of your mind, all the stuff that you know about. So please begin. If you have questions, I'll endeavor to respond to them.
Here's a question. I heard Sokuzan say recently, no regrets.
Just continue. Stop looking for success. Look at the feeling of regret so deeply that you see its foundation and see it as about how wonderful you are, and you need to and see it as about how wonderful you are, and you need to be rid of that. We're not separate. You'll suffer.
Shoto asks, what gives me the illusion that I do make decisions?
It's because of your self-importance, because you think you are. It's because of your self-importance, because you think you are. I'm not about the thoughts about that. I'm talking about the fundamental relationship of your consciousness with your grasping, or that aspect of the consciousness that curls up into a me and starts making demands on everything. I need this, I need that, I don't need it. I need to understand this. I shall get more of this, more of that. I've been meditating for years now. And so we tend to come to the conclusion that you're special, or that kind of situation be visible on the radar of sitting meditation or shikantaza. But you have to look at it. It is not about what arises in the sitting situation or awareness. It is about what begins to arise as your Buddha nature, you could say, relatively speaking, begins to take over your childishness.
Shoka asks, what is compassion?
No more center. No more center. You need to look closely at that scroll that I made for you, that you responded. You said it was pretty. That scroll for you, my friend, is like looking at a razor blade.
Junshu asks, how can we see that emotions are not personal?
Begin to look at the emotion, and so that you look at it so deeply that it starts to flip on you and it becomes a mirror, and you see there's no one there, that the emotion is dependently arisen, has no emoter, has no one receiving the emotion, that there is no one there. And you can do that by your persistence. It's not a particular stubbornness, it's just persistence. You've received a vow, contemplate the vow to be with all things. That would not, if there weren't for that vow, I would not be in this room. I just don't want to upset you by appearing in front of you.
Chazan asks, could you please say what it looks like to take responsibility for our emotions?
Stop blaming yourself, stop blaming others, stop taking credit, stop. Let the positions take themselves if they need to. And when they do, notice it, see it, but don't accept it, don't reject it, don't look away, don't validate anything. If you validate something, If you validate something, you will be constantly missing your Buddha nature.
Nicole asks, how can we remain open to observing without going into analyzing the observations?
Continue to look, I've told you, continue to just analyze. It's not your main job when you're doing sitting meditation is to hold very still and observe what moves. That includes the analysis. You don't have that much say-so about things. I'm sure you noticed. That's your message, not the idea that you can stop analysis. Look at the analysis, and then look at the analysis, and then be aware of the analysis, and then continue to analyze, and then look at the analysis, and then be aware of the analysis, and then continue to analyze, and continue to analyze. Hold the body very still, even if for only short bursts of time, where you eventually have to scratch your butt. Just observe it. Shikan taza, just precisely this, whether it's this precisely this blank wall, precisely this weird feeling of wanting to get up and run away, whether it's an intense barrage, avalanche of analysis, and then the reaction is, I need to stop. I may never stop analyzing. I certainly haven't. It's just that there's no analyzer.
If it seems to be apparent that I'm completely full of myself, have I stopped investigating it?
No, you've probably just begun if you come to that conclusion, or if the conclusion is your presence. Just continue. Work hard at it. In other words, sit down, hold still, face the wall, and receive. Give it your attention.
Junshu asks, when I start to see more and more how selfish I am, it looks like it's a defense.
Just look at, you don't need to abandon that for something else. Well, what is it? Abandon that for something else. Well, what is it I'm defending? That's a ploy of ego. And it will try to get on stage, even if it just wants to sweep the stage. It will get on stage. I'll just be here. I'm just on the stage of your mind. I won't interfere. I'll allow your Buddha nature to rise and get all the credit for being a wonderful Buddha teacher. I'll just be this lamp. I'm just a little ashtray on the table that nobody uses anymore. It's not about empty of cigarette butts. If you think there's something to clean up, then you've misunderstood. If you think there's something to get rid of, you've misunderstood. If you think up, then you've misunderstood. If you think there's something to get rid of, you've misunderstood. If you think there's something to change, you misunderstood. You just have to see what this is. Otherwise, you just keep doing what? Getting better, improving. You notice how sometimes people say to you, if they know you've been living in a monastery, they'll either do one of two or maybe one of 15 things. But on each end, one end is, I can tell you seem so much calm, so much more calm and peaceful. That monastery must be quite amazing. I don't know how you do that. I couldn't sit still for all that time. But you look really great. You sound great. You seem very poised and yak, yak, yak. Then there's the other end where you're just throwing a tantrum. Then the person says, after all that meditating and after all that sitting, you're still acting like a skunk. You're still acting like a child. Pay no attention. Train your mind. Other people's opinions are going to rise and fall like the weather. Let them do it. If someone meets you, if you're training your mind and someone meets you who has a trained mind, they won't have any comment. So first get a schedule, then follow it. And be insistent on it. Be insistent. Follow it. And that part of that may be about the way you keep moving away from it. You may have to watch that apparent failure quite a bit. That being said, keep the schedule. Observe the form. If it's a form you've received vows around, then observing the form means that most of your time is going to be spent either or completing your doing the practice that the form is outlining. But you're still looking at the practice that the form is outlining. But you're still looking at it. You're still practicing. There's still a practice happening there. That's why we have the forms. That's why we have them on Zoom or on wherever we have them. That's why I'm in this room. That's why I'm doing this. Have to do it. Observe. This might look like stubbornness, but it is. It has to do with the vow, and it has to do with teaching the Dharma.
Sokuzan from St. Louis asks, in a recent book study, we discussed a feeling of shame about who we really are. How can we be so ashamed, but at the same time grasp so tightly to our identity?
It's interesting that it's Sokuzan. It's a very similar situation that you're being caught in your commentary on what's happening, which shows up by virtue of the question that you're asking. It shows that there's an area there of which looks still, is trying to comply with sitting down, holding still, and looking at the wall, and be very still and be on receive. But something's being missed there, and what is being missed, if it were seen, would actually be open because it would be missed. But the way it sounds over here, not being able to look you in the face, it looks like you're putting something in there, little tiny analyses or judgments or conclusions about what you're feeling. So just look closer. I would say off the top of my head, and I still happen to have one, spend more time in the cushion holding still, less concluding about what arises in the mind stream, and more about observing the mind stream.
Shoka has another question. He asks, what is the center?
It's the same thing as the fringe. And if you think otherwise, you'll continue to spin.
Shoto asks, if I'm in a very abrasive dynamic with my world, do I function out of that abrasion?
So again, it is about awareness. So yes, you may need to do that, but if the attitude endeavoring to see what that vow is about and see what it means to train your mind, then some of that may come up, but it'll just be It'll just be seen in the whole group of things that are rising. Just like if you smell the fragrance of lilac rising, just like if you smell the fragrance of lilacs, which hopefully will come soon. Everything else is happening at once. All the colors in the room you're in, or the stairway you're walking down, the palms of your hands are showing up as feeling. Your heart is beating. Your mind stream is full of what you just talked about. Molecule everywhere, but you don't miss anything. Nothing is left out. Everything is included. All the sense fields, all the objects of the sense fields, everything is included.
So given the pain that you're experiencing this morning, how is it that the vow is what keeps you in this room?
I don't know. I don't know. I without what I would say, but I don't want you to misunderstand it, because there isn't anyone. But it's I am the vow. So when something comes, you receive it. I'm receiving this the best that I can. Hurts. Observing the form. Time to teach.
Is this an example that we should use for our own?
No, not necessarily. No. Just receive whatever's happening. Needs to happen. It doesn't have a little tiny need inside of it, like an air balloon or something, or like something in funny papers. More about that is good if you have it. Probably difficult to see what that is.
When I experience pain, and particularly when I have migraines, it seems like it just overwhelms me, and all I can think about is going to sleep, sleeping it off, and it usually takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And is my devotion to the vow weaker than it needs to be?
No, it's not. I'm going to go to bed too. I just don't. I mean, I will soon, probably, but not now. And I don't decide ahead of time. I always decide if there's a decision at all, the situation. So I could not have done this, as you know, 20 minutes ago, or half an hour. I could not have done it. My body would not have let me do that. That's why I couldn't get dressed. So I'm not saying this to create difficulty for people. You should all just receive whatever occurs in whatever form it shows up in your mind. Don't agree with it. Don't disagree with it. Don't look away. Don't believe anything. Don't believe. But that idea, I've done this many times, as you know. It just hasn't been so intense that I haven't been able to get my robes on, sit down.
So one of the practices that you were observing this morning was to go into the pain,
yes,
the intense pain, and you were quite silent with that pain. What is it about going into the pain that does it make a difference when you use that?
Yeah, it's just pain. It's not your additions on it about I can't stand this, or why is this happening to me? You don't do anything with it. It just it's just pain. But it's just pain is very simple. When we wiggle around, then it's suffering. This doesn't mean that you couldn't yell or whine or something like that. I certainly do. It doesn't mean being stoic. If you want stoicism, when you're really feeling really good, everything is fine, go face the wall instead of enjoying how fine everything is.
Chazan asks, how do you work with confusion while respecting it?
So it's going to show up lots of different ways. It'll have all kinds of personalities and shapes, and it will make demands on this is how it's going or that's how it's going. You need to see it this way. You need to stop feeling this or start doing that or act this way or that way. Always some kind of project around it. Just a project that or act this way or that way. Always some kind of project around it. Just a project. And when people say, how do you work with it? I usually say, just receive it. Train your mind so that you're clear about what's happening. Clarity about confusion. Clarity about suffering. Clarity. It's clarity. You're clear about the difficulty, about the suffering. So therefore, the suffering and your clarity are not two different things. This is called awakening. And there's no one to awaken. There's no one who ever slept. No one ever sleeps. Nothing sleeps. I'm looking outside of a window right now as I respond to your question, and I see a tree that has never slept.
Kiyun asks, what is meant by, quote, the way of the Buddha is unsurpassable, end quote?
Because it's not even a way. It's a way as long as it's a practice. There's a ground, path, and fruition. The ground is suffering of ourselves and others and the confusion of the world. The path is Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. Train your mind and sit down, hold still, see what it is. And then when you see what it is, there isn't anything else. So it's unsurpassable because you can't go beyond. You can't go beyond transcendence. You can't. There's no beyond. Just look that way. It looks like relative truth looks like a goal and a finish, and there is no finish. There's nothing. It can't be a finish to something that's not moving. There can't be a sound to something that is silent.
Junju asks, when something happens to someone else that doesn't seem like a big deal, if it happens to me, it feels like a bigger deal. If we see not separate, would that same discrimination occur?
Your awareness of this, you began to, if I may say so, you started to see the contrast and then think you'd arrived at something. I've arrived at how much I differentiate between myself and others, or how much I put emphasis on myself. The contrast and then think you'd arrived at something. I've arrived at how much I differentiate between myself and others, or how much I put emphasis on myself. There's just more to do. There's more work to do there. That's the beginning. We follow the contrast until we run out of shapes and sizes and colors, and you might say, why are we going to do that? Or you don't have to. You could just continue to spin and go through the six worlds, or those other worlds that Sokuzan thinks is true.
Hakaran asks, why is it so important for the monks to keep the forms going at the temple?
Somebody's got to do it. Might as well be monks.
Shuka has another question. Does a Dharma teacher have Dharma gates?
Everything is a Dharma gate. Every student is a Dharma gate. Everything's a Dharma gate. There isn't anything, but there's just everything is a Dharma gate. More if you have it.
He has another question that's not related to that, but he asks, how do we receive the teacher as an example without be like the teacher?
Who is this asking?
Shoka.
Yeah. So you may have to do some of that, but quite a bit of what you think is happening with a teacher is your projection. So that could show up as an actual area for you that you could emulate the teacher, but it's still your projection. What is happening with the teacher is not much. So I think that's more of a path question. I would just say keep going, but be aware of if you're trying to emulate or trying to be like the teacher. Just be aware of it. It's not something to get rid of, not something to set off to the side because you've concluded something about it, or it's right, it's wrong, it should be, it shouldn't be, or any of the other way stations. Just observe. It's a good question.
Soko Owen from St. Louis has another question. When we're suffering, where is the fear that it will go on forever coming from?
I wouldn't worry too much about where it's coming from. Just notice the fear. Notice it's going to go on forever. And if you wanted to, when you're in that area, rather than going to the fear area and use some kind of a palliative or something to suppress it or calm it, something has some kind of ontological or phenomenological status to it, will not last. It can't, just because of the nature of things. It's our fixation, our attribution, our grasping, clutching at things, and our intense narcissism. We see narcissism everywhere, but the intense narcissism that is in our consciousness, in our apparent identity, discussed as or described as this seventh consciousness. So it's just a matter of continuing to watch that and see the way we grasp at results or grasp at success and failure, or it's never going to go away. I'm experiencing that with this pain I'm having, feeling like it's never going to go away, but I know it will. Changes.
Senshu asks, when you say nothing sleeps, are you referring to something different than the sleeping we do at night?
So the sleeping we do at night is just has to do with the body-mind complex called a human being. But who you actually are is not a human being. We don't know exactly what we are because we look for information in terms of size, shape, texture, color, anything, any characteristic. That's the way we identify those things. And so who we actually are doesn't sleep. It's always awake. And you could say, well, or you might ask, well, that sounds like a relative term too. And yes, it is. We have to start somewhere. The story I sometimes tell is when I was in retreat, a month-long retreat back in 1977, about a month long, I woke up and just sat up in my sleeping bag and looked out across the field. It was on the other side of the window in the retreat hut. And that's what showed up. It wasn't words. It was just an understanding, a deep understanding that nothing sleeps. And it's like it came from somewhere else. It's like it came from me. It's like it came from, I have no idea. And it slowly, as an experience of that, or the experiential aspect of it, faded within, I don't know, a few days, maybe a week or two. And then it was just a memory.
Can memories be teachings?
Yes, if you remember something from the future, then it's pretty powerful. Is that your question? So why didn't you say your name first?
When you're bowing. Can memories be teachings?
Yes, it can be.
Sokuzan asks, what do I do with my disappointment in my apparent self?
So the this is something you've heard many times, the feeling of something is appearing or rising to you, and then you abandon the observer of that and go into what is being observed, which is your conclusion about that. And then we fiddle around with it. We try to push it down, it pops back up. We try to blame somebody or something, some situation, some otherness in order to have the illusion, and I emphasize that, of control. You have no control. You don't have, you might have some, but it's all very, very relative. If I can reach across, I'm reaching for a water glass right now, and I can pick that up, that the constant moving around of the physical form and identifying with the body-mind complex as a person, as a being, and it's reified and substantiated and enforced by cultures and everything. You are somebody who is alive and is doing this and doing that. And then you stumble into the path of the Buddha's Dharma, which is ancient, and you realize that there is no one. You might realize that intellectually first. You might have the luck of running into a teacher who tells you that. And then when you reach for the water glass, you realize there's no one home, there's no one there, there's no water glass, there's just relative. There's just a relative situation, which is what? Not separate. So therefore, everything you look at, nothing sleeps, everything is awake. So in your particular question, just continue and look for the one who feels that way. Look for the identity. Is there someone? Is there a solid being there? That being doesn't need to go away, like some teachers are teaching, the death of ego. And you don't have to get rid of something that is a hoax. You just sign. There's a few comments now and then. So what? And if it, the issue is if you try to get rid of the ego and then be the person who has no ego, then you start to, some kind of idealism begins to show up where you're better than everyone because you've transcended your ego. And there isn't one.
Laura from Traverse City asks, does receiving pain and going deeper into it lessen suffering on a relative level?
It doesn't matter. It might. It could do that. It could do lots of things, but it's not. We're not working with them particular. Not saying you're trying to do this, but we're not working with this as some kind of merchandising mentality, where we're doing this so that will decrease, or doing this so that will. That being said, fundamentally, that's all we've got to work with. So we just have to meet it where it's at. And if someone is suffering, we try to help them. But that doesn't mean we necessarily look for results. The idea is to do the work, actually do the work. If you're looking for results, that energy goes into looking for results, looking for conclusions, trying to create certain things, make certain things happen. There's lots of room for questions in that one too. That's we could spend the rest of the day talking about that.
Carl from Kalamazoo asks, given that awakening may be years, decades, or lifetimes away. Carl from Kalamazoo asks, given that awakening may be years, decades, or lifetimes away, how does fruition express itself now?
It's expressing it right now. You are covering it up. And that's not an opinion. You can awaken to this right now.
Michael Stoltz from Battle Creek has a two-part question. First, are forms important, and what makes them important?
Forms are important because everywhere we look, we see forms. We see cultural forms. We see family forms. We see traditional this and that. We see governmental operations of controlling people and making sure nobody slips through the cracks and has a life of their own, so to speak. So seeing that those structures, those forms in their intense, if you see them in their intense form, it's their bars on a jail. And that's the intense, that's what we do with part of our society, so the rest of the society can live in the contrast known as not breaking our laws, without really even looking at the foundation of the fundamental thing that happens. just wants to give the illusion of control. So all of these forms are there. We could go into that, also spend a lot of time. But the reason we use forms in the practice is in order for the same thing, in order to exercise some kind of control where you can see that which continues to move that you cannot control. The illusion of control, putting your horse in the barn, or painting your house, or building a house, or getting an education, or on and on. I needn't go on about that. But to sit down, hold still, and watch the mind, you see, you cannot control that. And even though there's all kinds of fancy Tibetan forms that talk about visualizations and mantras, and some kind of who are following their karma evil because they don't obey cultural laws. Just a misunderstanding. Right and wrong are extra, and right and wrong miss the chance of seeing deeply into those situations. I never ask anybody to trust me. Don't trust me. Don't trust anything. Don't even trust your own thought forms. If you do, you're going to spin. Awareness. It's always about awareness. In order for you or me or anyone to fundamentally be trained by our karma, you may have to do a lot of stupid things.
Sokuzan has another question. In Sandokai, what is the meaning of the line, "Do not waste your time by..."
What does that mean? See what it is and notice the way you object to it, agree with it, or look away. Don't waste your time by night or day. If you understand what this is, you will not be separate from any form. If you understand, but in order to understand what this is, you may have to spend a lot of time looking at the understanding part of the mind, turning the mind back around and looking at the grasping at itself, at the appreciation of me, the pride we have in ourselves, and the disgrace or shame we have that we contain as a badge of identity for the apparent ego mind or narcissistic mind.
Juzan asks, what is a life of our own?
The way I understand that is that you actually are able to be with the karma that is arising for you, so that you can see fundamentally who you are. This is what we're in the monastery. This is what I, as a student of the Buddha's teaching, trying to create with the help of others. I get the cooperation. I didn't do it myself. We're doing this with others. So, 10 years ago, this building was an apartment building that you're in. All of these buildings were, and now they're. This is a mandala of one can sit down and get to know who they are fundamentally, have a life of their own, instead of a life interlaced with all the confusion in the world called samsara, where there's plus and minus, up and down, back and forth, success and failure, the constant judgment of everything and everybody, and the manipulation and control features that happen in not only in governments, but in families, in relationships. So life of your own is you get to, you're having one pretty close to it. You're not on a mountaintop. You are a mountain, and you're inside a building with no top. If you don't understand, you should ask questions.
Chisho asks, what does going through ordination do to our practice?
I think it depends on the individual, but it gives us a form. It gives us, we can use our imagination to go back to ancient times, and we think of all the lineages that have happened. It's very difficult to practice any spiritual path. This one is no exception. So it would be different for each person. You were just thinking about the lineage of going from, in the case of this person, this Sokuzan as a teacher, going back through Kobunshi Roshi to back through Dogen Zenji, on back through the Chinese lineages, and then going back through Trungpa Rinpoche, through those lineages, two lineages coming together in this particular situation that we're in. And so that's to me, that's helpful to know that there's some kind of a thread or a bloodline that goes on there, warm hand to warm hand. It's not a credential, as I said, don't believe a word I say, but listen. And then you have that you have access. You personally have received a name, and your name is Wisdom Hammer, and that's to be respectful of your way of working with your intellect. And I've noticed it, I see it, and people get named according to what I see, and it usually is what I see as a fruition. And that doesn't mean I don't see it in someone who has never or never will receive Jukai. It's just that their path is just different. And I may or may not think that they should receive Jukai. Everybody should receive Jukai. So there's more room for response around that. If I knew specifically what brought up the question, perhaps Chisho. So if you have something.
John has another question.
Yes.
Are we building an enlightened society?
Yeah, yes. But it may not take the same branch that our Tibetan forefather here, Chogyam Trungpa, he was born a Toku and came into this country. He got quite overloaded by what he saw, and so his endeavor was to build an enlightened society, and so it's just a matter of working on it as you see it. And since I was born here, we're here and a Tibetan, so kind of a hybrid situation, but yet, we're right at Battle Creek, the city that I was born in. So, where do you start? Enlightened society would mean a society that was respectful of people. That there have been enlightened societies, the indigenous people. If you go back and look at any of their cultures, there was a great respect for individuals there, and also there was a terrible, horrible stuff happening too. So I would say, insofar as guidelines in it that are set up so that we can function in a sane way and still train and still face directly the in it that are set up so that we can function in a sane way and still train and still face directly the insane aspects of our enculturation, what we've been told by our family and this so-called Western culture. We're trying to work with that in a way that doesn't promote things like gossip, things like obeying laws, and especially obeying leaders. I don't ask anyone to obey me at all, and yet I'm the leading person here. More questions about that if you have them.
Not that, but Wendy asks, is physical pain relative?
Yes.
Actually wondering about my ordination.
Yeah, I wonder about mine too.
Kiyun asks, what is the way of the Buddha in the midst of craving?
So don't accept it, don't reject it, don't look away. Just use the three poisons. If there's craving for something else, if you can, just don't buy it. But don't get rid of the craving. But the craving is the causes and conditions that arise as any given feeling, emotion, or craving, or grasping, or desire that's dependently arisen. And what quite often happens is we attach the imaginary seventh consciousness or ego mind to I shouldn't crave, or I should get what I want, or I should be able to do this. And we just elaborate on it so that the actual situation is the dependent origination, paratantra, is not seen. It is personalized with the paraculpit of the imaginary nature, and we think that we take everything personal. It's like, you want to know what it's like not to do that? Go out and pick out any tree. Look at one of the limbs, and now look at all the leaves on there. Tell me which one's the best. What's the best leaf on that tree? But we're doing that with everything, and in our life, and one of those leaves is a grasping leaf. One of those leaves is an aggressive leaf, and those show up because of our fussiness about being particular about things. I can say more if you have another question about it.
Mayun has a question from France.
Yes, Mayun.
Is just pain a play of the mind? How may the path relieve it?
Include. It's just the very nature. We have nerve endings, and they're abraded, like with sometimes having headaches, and it's just arising out of the relative situation, which is unsearchable. It's untraceable. Not an exact metaphor, but moving parts. There's so much there. So let's work with you, me, us. Let's work with what is showing up, whatever it may be, and if it's take care of it. But don't do anything else. Don't do anything else with it. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't maybe go to a doctor or ways to attend to that situation. I certainly, if I'm in pain, I don't just think, oh, this is the Dharma, so I'm just have to suffer. I'm trying to find a way to relieve it. Just have to suffer it. No, I'm trying to find a way to relieve it. Take some ibuprofen. More questions?
Just another one. Thomas from Germany. He says, I send you all my best wishes. My question is, how is the practice on the cushion different from off the cushion, and how should it be different? Thank you.
So the difference should be emphasized, especially when you're beginning. And I'm saying the first, I don't mean to be discouraging here, but the first 10 or 15 years for sure. Don't do anything unless you have to, and that includes sitting meditation. But if you're listening to me, you probably need to do this. And sit down, hold as much stillness and silence as you can without going to war with your neighbors or your spouse or do as much as you can and create as much as you can, as much stillness and silence as you can without going to war with your neighbors or your spouse or do as much as you can without some kind of insistence. And if you look around, you can generally create something that's fairly still and fairly silent, and then watch what continues to move in that particular environment. And then when you get up off the cushion, the post-meditation, the way I teach it, and it's different than other teachers. I don't teach too many techniques in that area. I usually teach to the person. If I have a person who's working with a particular, maybe their mate or somebody that might not even be a practitioner, then I might give them actual techniques for working with that person that won't interrupt, that won't cause more warfare in the situation that may already be there, but may help interact with that. Because probably if a person is talking to me and they're training their mind, that probably is where they're at. Be with them and not agree with what they're doing, not disagree, and don't do anything with it. And then in the situation, so I would be, and that's the only one that's talking to me. So that's post-meditation. I would say, meet the person where they're at without making it too obvious, because then they feel like they're insulted. So just meet the person where they're at. Be with them and not agree with what they're doing, not disagree, and don't do anything with it. And then they will show you what they need. And that what they may need is for you to leave them, or what they may need is for you to attend to their difficulty with more affection or more attention or something. It's so variable. But Nadi and Prajna, sit down. The ground is suffering. The ground it's difficult. So find a place to sit down, hold still, and watch what moves. So when you get up off the cushion, then the path that is necessary, because you've already started the path on your butt, looking at nothing, that's unless things are moving in your mind stream. Then when you get up off the cushion, that very training that you're doing of watching what moves tends to help to, you could say it this way, depersonalize the areas of your mind that you've made so intensely personal and have a grudge against, or feels that there's some kind of profit in. The discriminating awareness is about getting ahead. It's a materialistic approach rather than wisdom. And so you're slowly making a transition over from grasping, rejecting, shutting down to receiving, giving everything your attention, being very kind and open in spite of your irritability. Just endeavoring to work with that in as open and kind way as you can. And as you go along, then it becomes more and more choiceless, less and less about some kind of practice you're going to do or this or that, and more about just functioning in the manifestation that shows up as you in your world without any warfare.
There's a final question from Sheldon, bowing. For what reason should everyone receive Jukai?
Well, Sheldon, because I
reason should everyone receive Jukai?
Well, Sheldon, because I said so. Well, the reason I say it is this being said, this doesn't mean anybody who comes to me, I'm going to give them Jukai. It means they have to really want it. So I'm just a way of talking about it, because I think that if you receive Jukai, if you receive vows, it's some kind of invisible glue that sticks you to the path. I mean, you've been a student of mine for many, many years, and I'm sure you recall, anytime you've talked to me, I've never recommended that you receive Jukai. If you can remember a time, send me a postcard. What the date was on it. I don't promote it. In fact, in fiction, if you come towards me and ask for Jukai, I'll turn you down. This is not a club. I'm not here to join. What you are, you're saying to me, I want your help as a Sangha, as a student of the Buddha's Dharma, or a teaching person. I want you to help me glue myself to this path, because I can see this path is easy to miss, easy to lose. In our culture, nothing is emphasized. People don't even know who we are or what we are. Very few. And if they did, they probably think we're Muslims, which wouldn't be so bad. Or they think we're Jehovah's Witnesses in black robes. There's so many projections going on. It's so confusing sometimes. In order to follow this path, in order to practice this path, in order to use the teaching of the Buddha to train our minds, we wander off and we forget it and we don't focus on it. And I can tell you, you may not be as difficult a situation as I am, but I had to have this. I wouldn't have lived. It was choiceless for me. And so I not only had to have two teachers, because I was that disturbed and confused. But you may, with you, Sheldon, I would never say you need to take precepts. I'm just saying as a general idea, because I think it would be good for people to train their mind before their body-mind. I'm just saying as a general idea, because I think it would be good for people to train their mind before their body-mind complex goes back into the elements. That can happen any minute. Death comes without warning, and it would be a good idea to be as clear as you can be about who you are. So when you go back into that intermediate state, the consciousness principle has as much clarity based on training while in this very dense, low frequency realm we call the realm of human beings, the realm of desire. Form and formless realms is very, very unclear. Rather than the only clarity you can get there is by biting down on the concepts. That's why I don't teach those realms. And I almost stopped her, but I thought, no, she should go ahead. Let's see what she thinks about those. So she should go ahead. Let's see what she thinks about those. So does she have a question?
No, but several people are telling us that our connection is getting worse. The internet connection. And two people, in case we get cut off, thank you, Sokuzan. This is from Laura. Up in Traverse. Thank you for taking Time for us in the midst of your difficult day, sending healing energy your way. And also Chisho says, thank you, Sokuzan. Get well soon. So we can go ahead and dedicate the merit. May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san chi ishifu, shison bu sa moko sa. Moko ja ho mi. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. The light and protect Sokakoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, her Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.